Arya placed instant ramen in front of me. There's only enough for the family. I couldn't understand what Arya was saying. Should I head home? Kevin said just that and started towards the entrance. Yes. I also stood up and followed Kevin. I'm sorry for everything that happened. Like emotions bursting out, I told Kevin everything up to now. How Arya had suddenly changed her attitude towards me. My name is Harper. I'm a 56-year-old housewife. My husband's name is Kevin. Kevin and I worked at the same company. It was what you'd call an office romance. I was in accounting, and Kevin was in sales, different departments, but he would often come to accounting. Kevin used to distribute souvenirs from his business trips to the accounting department. Kevin was thoughtful and kind. Whenever I had to go to the sales department for receipt verification, Kevin was the first to help. Even when it wasn't his fault, Kevin would always apologize. His handling was sincere, and his smile was kind. I was secretly attracted to him, but too embarrassed to make the first move, so we continued as colleagues for a while. Then, one time, it came to light that one of the employees was falsifying receipt processing. Kevin cooperated with the accounting department, worked hard to uncover the truth, and when it was resolved, he invited me to a dinner under the pretense of a consolation party. I thought it would be a group outing, but it was just Kevin and me. I was surprised, but more so delighted. Dinner with Kevin was so enjoyable that I lost track of time. We shared a hobby, or rather a way of thinking, like finding it fun when the numbers in the ledger matched perfectly. After that, we went out to eat several times, and went on dates. After about 6 months of this, Kevin proposed to me. I pretended to think about it, but was extremely happy. I tried to keep him in suspense for about a week, but my happiness got the better of me, and I said yes the next day. Kevin has been very kind since we first met. That hasn't changed, even now that we're married. He always thinks of me. He makes sure we have quality time together as a couple. I consider myself very lucky to be married to Kevin. I continued working after we got married, but I quit when I got pregnant with our eldest son, Brian. Brian's birth was difficult. He was breech. Kevin was told by the doctor that it could endanger either of our lives. Despite this, we doted on Brian when he was born. Brian was a mischief maker, leaving the house covered in doodles, dismantling toys quickly. Still, we didn't scold him and let him grow up freely. Because of the risks associated with pregnancy and childbirth, Kevin and I decided that Brian would be our only child. For that reason, Brian was our precious treasure. In kindergarten and early elementary school, he was so free-spirited that he caused his teachers quite a bit of trouble. We were cautioned at numerous parent-teacher conferences. However, as he moved into the upper grades of elementary school, he seemed to gain some discretion, and his behavior improved. From then on, Brian was quite the honor student. He had good grades and served as the president of the student council. He was also a leader in his club. His test scores never fell below 90. However, at home, Brian didn't seem to study much. When I peeked into his room, Brian was usually lying down reading manga. When I asked, "Brian, while reading manga, are you studying?" "Yeah," he would always say. Yet Brian never let his grades slip. He must have been working hard in ways I didn't know. Brian went on to a public junior high and high school. Despite his grades, he chose the public school closest to our home, though he could have gone to a prestigious private school. Even in junior high and high school, his grades were always at the top, and he was the student council president. He went to a local public university for college. In college, he seemed more devoted to activities like volunteering than to his studies. Then, when he started job hunting, Brian only applied to local companies. With his grades, He could have worked for a large corporation or a foreign company. I was puzzled why Brian chose such small companies. I asked Brian why. Since high school, I kind of always wanted to work locally. Apparently, there was a class assignment about the local area in high school that sparked his interest in staying local. He chose the local university and through volunteer activities sought to deepen his understanding of our town. I hadn't realized Brian had been thinking along these lines and honestly admired it. That's impressive. You really thought it through. I praised Brian. It's not a big deal, Brian said, laughing shyly. Brian got the job he wanted at a local company and graduated from university without issue. I thought he would commute from our house, but he decided to rent an apartment near his company. Brian is very strong and likes to show his independence. It's all experience, he said. He wanted to experience living on his own and learn how difficult housework can be. Our home became quiet as if a light had gone out after Brian left. But then I remembered, this is how it was when Kevin and I first got married. I decided to enjoy living just with Kevin again. Thanks to Brian choosing public schools, we had quite a bit of savings left. The mortgage on our house was almost paid off, so it looked like we could pay it off around the time Kevin retires. Furthermore, my parents have a broad apartment management business. Eventually, it looks like I will take over the apartment management. We won't have any financial troubles in our old age. Brian's apartment was close enough that he could come and go by bicycle, so he often came home. Thanks to that, I never felt lonely. After a few years of this peaceful life, Brian said, I have someone I want you to meet. It was when he was 26. Brian brought that woman home. Let me introduce you. This is Arya. Brian and Arya worked at the same company, and she was in the accounting department. Hearing that, Kevin and I exchanged looks and laughed. Brian and Arya looked at us curiously. Kevin started telling our story with a laugh. Listening to us, Brian and Arya looked at each other and laughed too. Arya was petite, with eyes that drooped down when she laughed, giving her a very cute and kind impression. Arya seemed restless, looking around our home. Her actions reminded me of a little bird looking around, which was charming. Kevin and I liked Arya right away. If only we had been suspicious at that moment. The trouble that followed might have been avoided. There was a hidden reason why Arya was looking around our home. Kevin and I failed to notice it. Nice to meet you. Arya's voice was very pleasant, and I thought Brian was lucky to have her. Arya was a good listener, and even the usually quiet Brian seemed happy talking with her. The four of us had dinner together and enjoyed a pleasant time. After Arya and Brian left, Kevin and I were relieved and happy that Brian had chosen a good partner. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Brian and Arya's relationship progressed smoothly, and they decided to get married. They had their wedding at a local venue and were blessed by everyone. Kevin and I were so happy. That day became one of the most memorable in our lives. However, we couldn't have imagined that from here, our lives would start to spiral downwards, with misfortune hitting Kevin and me. At first, we thought it was coincidence or maybe Arya wasn't feeling well, but it didn't seem to be the case. Her attitude towards me got worse day by day. When I tried to discuss what to have for dinner with Arya, at first, she pretended not to hear. The next thing she would say was usually, "What?" in an annoyed tone. I was taken aback by Arya's attitude. I was wondering what to have for dinner. Arya's replies were always cold. Oh, whatever is fine. Harper, you decide. The atmosphere wasn't conducive to discussion at all. Arya's attitude had clearly changed since we first met. And it was only towards me. Instead of getting angry, I was more confused. I didn't want to ruin my relationship with Arya, so I ended up being more submissive than necessary. Then how about beef stew for dinner today? Arya replied with an air of inconvenience. That's fine, I guess. And cut off the conversation with me. I immediately started preparing the beef stew. Then Arya, without offering to help, would always mutter to herself with comments like, "What about the ingredients, the spices?" I ignored her words and silently continued cooking. While cooking, I wondered if I had done something terrible to Arya. But I couldn't think of anything. Did I say something unpleasant to her? Did I do something to offend her? I tried desperately to remember. But nothing came to mind. Honestly, I had no idea why she was acting this way. Arya's attitude didn't improve after that. Every time Arya treated me badly, I wondered if I had done something to her. However, I couldn't understand why Arya was treating me so badly. I felt like the reason for Arya's change in attitude wasn't me, but something else. This was just a feeling, without any certainty. A year passed, and Arya's attitude towards me remained unchanged. In fact, it got even worse. "Harper, this food looks disgusting." Arya began to openly criticize my cooking. Unlike before, she now blatantly insulted it. "Doesn't the seasoning seem too strong, and doesn't it look unappetizing?" I couldn't help but talk back. "We always eat this at home." Arya responded to my words with a mocking laugh. "Is that so that's lame?" I was honestly quite irritated by Arya's attitude. "If you're going to complain that much, next time you can cook by yourself." "Scary! Harper, you're scary!" Arya exaggerated her fear in a loud voice. Probably so that Kevin and Brian in the living room could hear. I was scared of this calculating side of Arya. Anyway, Arya's attitude was only visible when it was just the two of us. She kept making provocative comments to me. I thought many times about discussing it with Kevin or Brian. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Arya was very devoted to Kevin. She also got along well with Brian. So I thought I just had to endure it. I didn't want to ruin the relationship. "Tonight's dinner is a gillo made by Harper." Arya served the dish with a huge smile. Knowing the Arya from the kitchen, all I could do was give a wry smile. Kevin sat down, saying, "That looks delicious." Brian also smiled. "Harper can cook delicious meals, and she's good at laundry and cleaning. I really admire her." Arya turned to me with a smile. Honestly, I felt sick. "Harper, you're really amazing." The two who didn't know the face Arya hid behind her smile looked at her fondly. "Thank you." I returned a smile as if to keep up appearances. Anyone who didn't know would notice my expression was forced. If they saw Arya's smile, they wouldn't think she treated me badly. I feared being called a liar by Kevin and Brian. I thought if I kept enduring without consulting anyone, Arya's attitude might change. However, Arya's harsh words and attitude towards me never ceased. Arya continued to complain about the food I made. But she never did anything herself. And the cleanup too. And she would quickly complain about anything even slightly dissatisfying. One day, Arya threw unbearable words at me. "Harper, are you saying with that seasoning?" I couldn't endure it and snapped back at her. "Do you have a problem?" Arya pretended to be shocked as usual. "Eh? No, I don't. Scary." "What do you mean by that? Stop belittling me already." Arya seemed slightly taken aback by my earnest gaze. "I'm not belittling you," she muttered, biting her lip and glaring at me. "It's always truly unpleasant with you," I continued. "Shut up! A woman like you!" It was as if Arya's mask had slipped. Her face contorted uglily all of a sudden. "Being treated roughly is just about right for you." Arya continued to berate me. Towards me, Arya said,
"You're really pathetic. Ugly face and nasty personality. The idea of you being a MIL is unbelievable."
Her insults were relentless. To belittle me to this extent must mean she really dislikes me. But still, I can't understand how she can say such horrible things to someone she dislikes. If she dislikes me that much, I think she should just stay away and keep her distance. I felt sad. It's sad that you think that way. Arya raised her voice in a semblance of panic.
"No, I really can't take this anymore. Hey, are you okay?"
Kevin called out from the living room. Arya's loud voice had reached the living room. I heard a loud voice. Brian came into the kitchen. Brian came from the living room to check on Arya and me arguing. Seeing Brian's face, Arya seemed to regain her composure. Sorry, there was a cockroach. I went along with Arya's act.
"Yes, that's right. Sorry for making a fuss,"
Arya said. We've dealt with the cockroach, so it's fine now. And pushed Brian back towards the living room. Brian said, "Okay," and went back to the living room. Neither Arya nor I wanted to involve Brian and Kevin. This was a problem between Arya and me. Our relationship did not change after that. An unpleasant atmosphere continued to linger between us. However, about half a year later, happy news came to Brian's family. Brian and Arya were expecting a child. I hoped this would change my relationship with Arya. Arya, being cautious with her pregnancy, reduced her visits to our home. For a while, I regained a peaceful daily life. During Arya's absence, I kept thinking about why she changed her attitude towards me. I could think of nothing. There was one thing that bothered me, but could that really be the reason for her attitude? Dismissing it as impossible, I shook my head and went shopping. When Arya entered her stable period, Arya and Brian came to visit our house. I thought that having a child would calm Arya down. But that was wishful thinking. Upon seeing me, Arya resumed her terrible attitude. Different from Harper, it's growing well. I told Arya, "Take care of yourself and rest on the sofa." But Arya showered me with harsh words. "No thanks. Who knows what you'd cook if I left it to you? Furthermore, I need to keep an eye on you," Arya said. What does she mean by keep an eye? So, this is how Arya sees me. You can talk back, but I'm fine with anything said by you who could only have one child. I responded calmly. Oh, is that so? But inside, I was far from calm. I felt guilty for not being able to give Brian siblings. I harbored a sense of apology towards Brian in my heart. I poured love into Brian and had more time to engage with him. Kevin and I were able to lead a relaxed life. I had no regrets about that. As I fell silent, Arya continued to taunt me. That reaction can't even talk back. Pathetic. I didn't understand what Arya wanted or why she was doing this. Feeling it was futile to engage any further, I ignored Arya. A few months later, Brian and Arya's healthy baby girl was born. For Kevin and me, she was our first granddaughter. We were incredibly happy. We eagerly awaited the day we could meet our first granddaughter. I hoped that having a child would improve my relationship with Arya. With my experience in parenting, I thought I could offer Arya plenty of advice. But my hopes were not fulfilled. This became clear at the first granddaughter's unveiling party. The truth behind Arya's actions towards me was also revealed. A week after Arya and the baby were discharged from the hospital, Kevin and I rushed to Brian's apartment with gifts for the birth celebration. We brought loads of presents for our granddaughter, including swaddles, a baby carrier, diapers, and formula. Arya looked a bit worn but appeared healthy. I was bothered by her cold gaze when she saw me, but I was too eager to see my granddaughter to care. The first granddaughter was sleeping in her crib. The thought of Brian becoming a dad was deeply moving. Brian seemed to have taken on a more mature look. I laid out the groceries I had bought on the table. Thinking they wouldn't have had proper meals just after the birth, I had bought plenty of ready-made food for Brian and Arya. As I was about to start preparing in the kitchen,
"Please sit down, I'll take care of it,"
Arya said. "You don't have to push yourself," I replied, but Arya insisted and pushed me down into a chair.
"It's okay."
I sat down, feeling overwhelmed by Arya's insistent behavior. Arya plated the ready-made food and served it in front of Kevin and Brian.
"Please eat."
I thought my portion would come next, but Arya placed only one plate on the table. Not in front of me, but at her own seat. I had a bad feeling but remained silent.
"Oh dear, I forgot Harper's portion."
Kevin and Brian laughed. It seemed I was the only one with a bad premonition. But Kevin and Brian were soon frozen by Arya's next action. Arya placed instant ramen in front of me. "There's only enough for the family." I couldn't understand what Arya was saying. As I sat there stunned, Arya added insult to injury with a laugh. "You're not family. You're a stranger. Isn't that obvious?" I didn't understand what she meant by not being family. I realized Arya's feelings towards me hadn't changed from before. Then Kevin stood up.
"Shall we go?"
With just those words, Kevin headed towards the entrance. Yes. I also stood up and followed Kevin. In the apartment lobby, I apologized to Kevin. "I'm sorry for what happened." Kevin looked at me with a gentle smile. "It's Arya who's in the wrong." "What happened?" I told Kevin everything, like a dam bursting. About how Arya suddenly changed her attitude towards me. And pretended to be friendly in front of Kevin and Brian. Kevin looked into my eyes and nodded slowly. I asked Kevin why he believed everything I said. "Well, I never imagined Arya would do such a thing. If I were in Kevin's position, I would think the same. Arya had been very cunning. Harper, you wouldn't lie, especially not to speak ill of someone." Kevin trusted me. I was really touched by that. Kevin muttered to himself as if talking to himself. "It would be unthinkable for me, her husband, not to believe Harper." Tears welled up in my eyes. Kevin handed me a handkerchief with a laugh. "I'm also to blame for not realizing it sooner. It couldn't be helped. I had kept it all hidden. I'm really sorry." Kevin's words made me cry uncontrollably. "Don't worry about anything. I'm here for you." Through tears. "Thank you," I said. How dependable Kevin was. I was moved by Kevin's kindness. As we were about to leave the apartment lobby, my phone rang. It was from Brian. Feeling guilty for ruining the celebration of our first granddaughter, I answered the call. Brian's call. "I want to have a proper discussion, so please come back." A proper talk. He wanted to apologize for Arya's rudeness and mentioned that Arya had been acting strangely. After consulting with Kevin, we decided to go back. Brian welcomed us at the entrance and led us to the nursery, which was already set up with a study desk and bed. I couldn't help but laugh at how prepared they were. "I'm really sorry about Arya. Has there been trouble for a while?" Brian seemed to have noticed something. "That time in the kitchen when there was a loud voice, you were arguing, weren't you?" Right, we had lied about seeing a cockroach. Brian had known all along. I explained to Brian how Arya's attitude changed towards me shortly after their marriage. Brian was silent, but his fists were clenched tightly. "I'm really sorry." Brian believed what I said. I thought Brian might defend Arya and call my story a lie. Tears came to my eyes again. I've decided to divorce Arya. Kevin and I were shocked and speechless. Why? I managed to say just one word. Kevin nodded in agreement. Brian said as he left the room and headed for the living room. I'll explain everything now. Kevin and I followed him. From the living room came Arya's crying and
No!
a scream. The divorce papers were on the dining table. I didn't miss Brian's signature on them. When Arya saw my face, she threw magazines and ornaments she had in her hand at me. One nearly hit me. Then, Kevin shielded me, and a small ornament hit Kevin's face. Kevin's glasses flew off in a wrong direction. Arya probably didn't expect it to hit. She stopped moving, eyes wide open. I was shocked and saw blood flowing from near Kevin's temple. Brian approached Arya with an incredibly stern look, holding her hands down.
Do you realize what you've done?
Brian exclaimed in a tone I had never heard from him before. Arya collapsed on the spot as if her legs gave out.
It's not my fault. I'm not the bad one. It's her.
Arya was muttering the same words over and over, looking dazed. Brian looked at me sadly. Right after we got married, Arya visited Mom, remember? I tried to recall when that was. Then it hit me. I finally understood the discomfort I felt back then. Yes, Arya visited me alone. She had asked me for a loan at that time. Brian was unaware of this loan. So, first, talk to Brian about it, I said. At that time. Understood. Arya quickly agreed and went back home. Since she never consulted me about it again, I assumed it was resolved. This was a secret I kept to myself, so Kevin didn't know. Kevin looked at me, surprised. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I felt sorry for Arya and didn't say anything.
That's what I hate, your pretense of being good.
Suddenly, Arya hurled insults at me. Quite a vulgar way to speak. About that loan, Arya borrowed from somewhere else and repaid it. Brian also told me about Arya's spending habits. Arya has always been extravagant with money. She prefers expensive ingredients and loves brands. Even when Brian met Arya, she was in debt. Brian had a talk with Arya not to borrow any more money. Unless she agreed, he couldn't continue the relationship, and Arya consented. At that time, Arya was crying and apologizing. Brian looked down at Arya sadly.
Anyway, I'm definitely not in the wrong. It's her fault.
Arya insisted she was not to blame, but her words lacked any conviction. Brian and Kevin looked at Arya with cold eyes.
Shut up! Just shut up! Shut up!
Arya began to cry and scream as if she had a tantrum. We couldn't handle her anymore and kept our distance. When Arya was about to smash a ceramic ornament on the floor, the baby in the crib started crying. I rushed to soothe the baby. When Arya yelled,
Shut up! Why is this kid crying?
We were shocked and looked at Arya.
Everyone's just getting in my way. Shut up!
The baby cried louder as if Arya's yelling set it off. I tried to calm the baby, but it wouldn't stop crying.
Ah, so annoying. Make that child stop crying now.
Was this the real Arya? Her way of speaking remained vulgar. Those eyes were not sane. She seemed to have lost her mind. Concerned for the baby's safety, I decided to take the baby to the nursery.
Where are you taking him?
Because I don't know what you might do. Arya was yelling to let go of the baby. Arya, put down that ornament in your hand first. Arya looked at the ceramic she was holding up. Is it okay to show that to the baby? Kevin's calm words seemed to bring Arya back to her senses. She quietly put down the ornament and covered her face with both hands. Arya started crying loudly. In the end, Kevin and I decided to take care of the baby that day. We left Brian and Arya to talk things over slowly. The next day, Brian came to our house. Brian looked haggard but somehow refreshed. In the living room, Kevin and I heard the story from Brian. It was a dreadful one. Yesterday's story was about Arya's terrible spending habits. Despite Brian's persuasion, her spending habits did not improve. In fact, they had gotten worse. Arya, who had been borrowing money from everywhere, had set her sights on our assets. When I heard this, I understood why Arya had looked around our house when she first came. She was checking if there was anything valuable in the house, whether we were wealthy. Then she tried to extract money from me. However, she seemed to have borne a grudge after being refused. That's why she started treating me harshly. I shivered in fear. It wasn't that I was mean and refused to lend her money, I just wanted them to discuss it as a couple first. Arya took it the wrong way. But Brian's story didn't end there. Arya had been acting strange lately, so Brian had hired a detective to investigate. As a result, Arya's affair was discovered. Moreover, Arya was conspiring with that man to steal Kevin's life insurance money. I was shocked.
How could it be?
Brian nodded silently. They were planning to make it look like an accident. Brian continued the story with difficulty. Arya was tormenting me, trying to drive me out of the house. She planned to get rid of Kevin once I was out. What a thing to do. Arya had such a terrifying plan. I shivered and hugged myself. Brian had decided to divorce after receiving the report. He was about to discuss it when this incident happened. Brian said he was going to report it to the police. We can't stay silent about this. Indeed, if left unresolved, Arya might repeat her actions. She would take it for granted and do the same or worse. Arya should be properly dealt with, Brian said. Kevin agreed. I told Brian it was for the best too. Brian reported to the police, and Arya was arrested. Since she was trying to fraudulently claim the insurance money, it was natural she was caught. Arya's diary specifically detailed how to obtain the insurance money. Brian and Arya's divorce was finalized while Arya was in custody. Arya seemed to have claimed custody, but naturally, it went to Brian. Even the lawyers were appalled by Arya's claim to custody. If Arya is prosecuted, she and her co-conspirator will likely receive actual prison sentences. I want Arya to reflect deeply and face her crimes in prison. Not only did she ruin Brian's life, but she also caused great trouble for the child born into this mess. The assault on Kevin did not become a case because Kevin did not file a complaint. That was typical of Kevin's kindness. With Arya gone, peace has returned to my heart. I sleep well at night, and my heart doesn't race when I visit Brian's house. Life with just Kevin and me has been peaceful. The times Arya stirred up trouble seem like a lie to me now. Brian and the grandchild live together. Fortunately, Kevin and I live nearby. We help with everything from childcare center drop-offs and pickups to meals. Above all, being able to watch the grandchild grow up close is a joy. If things continue this way, Kevin and I might see the grandchild's coming-of-age ceremony. The grandchild was a baby, so he doesn't remember mom. It might be sad, but it's probably better that such a mom isn't around. Besides, it seems Brian has a girlfriend. The grandchild whispered it to me as a secret. I'm looking forward to Brian introducing the woman he wants to introduce. There's only enough for the family.